So ever since earnings, we've pretty much have been seeing a lot of selling pressure from Tesla. Now, if you're someone who's been following and watching the channel, then you know that this has been the sentiment that I've been preaching for a while now, and I really have been saying this based off of two things. One being the fundamentals of the company, but also two, just being the macroeconomic environment. Plus, as someone who has parsed through several financial websites, I can tell you that pretty much everything has been saying that things are not going to be looking good. But with that said, I want to go ahead and talk about Tesla both in the short term and in the long term, and also talk about some things that are coming up this week. For example, this week has a bunch of economic data coming out, such as the US retail sales, import price index, plus we also have Fed President Kashari speaking later on this week. But then on top of that, we also have the FOMC meeting minutes. Now those meeting minutes are pretty crucial because we want to understand where the Federal Reserve and its members are pretty much looking at in terms of what's going on in the economy and what are their views on hiking, pausing, or cutting rates. But along with that, on Thursday we have a continued update on initial jobless claims, so we get an update on the labor market, and then we also get an update on the leading economic index, which by the way has been downtrending for a while, signaling signs of a poor economy. Now it hasn't just been Tesla individually falling down. For example, if we take a look at the Nasdaq index ETF QQQ, we see that the overall tech sector has been pretty much declining as well. But also we have a bunch of earnings coming out this week, with some of the notable ones being Target and Walmart. Now typically when I mention earnings from other companies like Walmart, I get comments in the comment section below of people saying, you're an idiot, why are you even talking about Walmart or Apple or any of these other companies? I only want to know about Tesla. Now here's the thing, guys. We have to pay attention to these earnings because Walmart is the biggest employer of this entire nation. And so we want to see how Walmart's doing, because obviously if Walmart's not doing good, well, that could give us a sign of what they may do with its employees. Are they going to be cutting hours? Are they going to be laying off their employees? This is something that we want to pay attention to, how the health of Walmart is, pretty much doing. Now, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop and touch on Tesla a little bit more in regards to the short term, but I want to talk about the long term. Now, typically, I talk about this towards the end of the video, but obviously, YouTube's data tells me that the retention rate of people making it to the end of the video is quite low, right? It's actually only like 30%. And so I want to talk about something. I don't want to come off as a negative Nancy, like, oh yeah, I'm bearish on Tesla in the short term. I'm still bullish on Tesla in the long term, right? And the reason I often say this is because of the fundamentals, obviously a huge push in EVs and etc., right? Now, one of the things I want to talk about is what I actually see valuable for Tesla going forward. So many of the price targets, the huge price targets that you hear from these fund managers on Tesla, is really based off the premise of autonomous driving becoming a thing with Tesla, and them being able to license out that technology, and also have this kind of monthly sales or payments on being able to use this technology in their vehicles. Now, we've recently got an update from Waymo and Cruise, which are now allowed to launch paid 24/7 fully autonomous vehicles in San Francisco. Now, I know this isn't necessarily Tesla, but this is honestly a good update, because obviously we want to see that local governments are giving the green light for autonomous vehicles to drive around, obviously having the service of people paying to use them and being able to drive with less of a limited scope. And so this is pretty much good for Tesla in the long term, because if these companies are getting the green light, well, when Tesla, gets a higher level in their autonomous driving services, right? Well, they're going to be able to get the green light as well. And so this is pretty much good for Tesla. But one of the things I often get is people commenting, about Tesla in the long term, and they ask me, well, you're talking about fully self-driving and obviously the software updates in Tesla, but what about the humanoid robots, right? But here's the thing, in Tesla's last earnings call, we heard Elon Musk mention that Tesla has only really built 5 or 6 of these humanoid Optimus robots so far, and he mentioned that building them is actually quite difficult, as it's hard to get the resources to actually build them. And so with that said, this isn't really too significant of obviously an update with these robots, and it's hard to put an evaluation on Tesla with these bots, right? Now, obviously, if you have a long-term vision, you could see how beneficial this could be to society, but you can't put a valuation on that now, right? Especially when there's so so few of them actually being produced, and we can't really see what it's possible to really do with these robots. Now, do I think that Elon Musk can achieve the goal of, actually having them contribute to, the labor markets? Yeah, I'm not saying it's not possible, but right now we're not seeing that. Now, obviously, this is going to be huge when it comes out, right? So, for example, I want to kind of just like talk about something real quick. Now, a few months ago, I read this book called What We Owe, The Future, right? Now, this book, I actually just bought it and read it simply because Elon Musk tweeted about it one time, saying that it was a good book and that he actually agreed with a lot of the ideas, right? Which, by the way, if you guys want to read that book, I do have a link in the description of this video with a list of, all the books I've read. Most of them are finance books, but, there's some philosophy books and books like this, which I definitely encourage you guys to check out. But one of the interesting things in that book, right, was a topic about, a declining population. See, when we are, or what we see is a trend in a lot of these wealthy nations, such as the United States, Canada, a lot of Western Europe, right? These nations are typically more wealthy, and wealthy nations are kind of seeing this decline in population, where we see the opposite happening with a lot of the poorer countries. For example, in the continent of Africa, there's a lot of countries that are not that wealthy, and it's expected that their population is going to grow to an enormous amount, where Africa may have the biggest population in the next 50 years, right? And so why does this matter? Why do we even care about population decline? Well, here's the thing, right? Obviously, population decline is a concern because if we have less people obviously being born, well, that means that there's less productivity, right? Which means that, GDP may not be able to continuously expand, and we may see a contraction. And so the idea that these Optimus humanoid robots can be built to help contribute to the labor markets and increase productivity, it's huge, right? It's absolutely huge. It's a huge goal. It's a huge vision. But like I said, it's hard to put a valuation on that currently, especially when, Elon Musk himself has said that they built a few of them, right? And it's obviously not something that they're selling. So, that's something I just wanted to mention about the long term for Tesla. Again, I don't want to come off as a negative Nancy. Oh, you're talking about Tesla being bearish in the short term. It's just in the short term. In the long term, I'm still bullish, but I'm not, obviously going to put a huge price target based off, things that we can't even put a valuation on, right? My price target for Tesla going into, by 2030, right, and this is very conservative, is $500, right? I'm bullish on Tesla, but I'm not, putting these insane valuations because it's hard to put a number on things that we can't see yet. But I still think these things can happen. It's just I'm not putting a number on those, right? But with that said, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop and talk about Tesla stock now in the short term. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop, which, by the way, someone commented last week saying, are you ever unofficially in your laptop? You always say you're officially in your laptop, and I just thought that was funny. You guys crack me up in the comment section sometimes. But, going on topic and trying to not deviate and go off tangent, I want to talk about Tesla, right? So for a while, I've been saying, as I said in the beginning of this video, that we're going to be seeing a lot of selling pressure in the short term. And in fact, I highlighted an area that was really, I called it the early 200s, right? And a lot of individuals thought I was crazy for saying these early 200 levels, right? They were like, no, that's not going to happen. Tesla beat its earnings. But I often say there's a lot of nuance when it comes to looking into the earnings. It's not, oh, did a company beat its earnings? Especially when all these earnings have been revised. I mean, most of these companies, 80% of the companies in the overall S&P 500 so far this quarter have beat their earnings. But is it really that significant when, these companies give out hints and analysts revise their expectations, and so earnings are they don't have to come up too hard to really beat them, right? Then on top of that, forward guidance hasn't been that great. This is why, when I talk about, Tesla or any other stock on this channel, I don't just look at the charts. I don't just look at the fundamentals. I look at all the economic data as well. And so far, a lot of the economic data that we're seeing is not really pointing towards, these stocks to go up further or any higher, right? But looking at things from a technical perspective, one of the things I've highlighted before is this volume pocket, right? So I often talk about this volume profile on the right-hand side over here on the channel, which is different, right? This is volume relative to price, and that's significantly different from your traditional volume by time. Most people understand volume by time. Now, volume by price basically just shows us how much volume in exchange, right? We have to understand what volume is, people buying and selling at a certain price level, right? And so when there's typically less volume relative to price, that's where we see the big spikes. Why do we see the big spikes, right? Well, there's an absence of volume over here where there's not a lot of exchanging going on, and so if there's selling pressure and there's a low amount of volume relative to price, well, it could come down quickly. And then the inverse would be, well, if there's a lot of buying pressure and there's very little volume relative to price, we could see things come upwards, right? And so I've often highlighted, I told the exclusive Push and Profit private group about a couple of days ago that I'm watching Tesla, and this range I'm looking at is the 215 to 230 level. We're not too far from there. I mean, I remember when I first mentioned this idea on the channel, people, like I said, thought I was crazy. I mean, Tesla has fallen down almost 20%. And so to get to that range that now, I've been calling the early 200s, it's roughly only like 6% away. Tesla can do that in a day. Now, one of the things we have to understand is that when it touches that area, it could be a sharp decline because, again, there's very little volume relative to price. And so if the selling pressure comes, it could drastically drop down, right? And so that's one of the things I'm looking at for Tesla in the short term, right? And I'm still bearish on Tesla, at least for now, right? Now, it may change once we hit that range, and we'll obviously have to reevaluate, what we're seeing with Tesla, because of course we have to be agile, right? We can't just have one side and be dogmatic. We have to obviously shift when the market shifts. And so as I highlighted earlier in this video, we have the US retail sales coming out on Tuesday. Now, that's going to be important to really parse through because we want to see, well, is the retail sector of the economy still doing good? Are people, buying? Or people not spending money as they once were, because that's obviously going to impact a lot of earnings, and that's obviously going to provide a negative sentiment for the markets. And of course, we have the import price index, and then we also have Fed President from Minneapolis, Kashari, speaking. And I often say that it's important to listen to these Fed speakers, but more importantly, the ones that are actually voting members of the FOMC, right? Because obviously, there's members that are part of that, the FOMC, but they're not voting members, and they may not be voting members until next year because obviously it rotates, right? With some members having a permanent seat. But Kashari, I believe it's Neil Kashari, right? Fed President Neil Kashari, he is a voting member. And so we want to see what his commentary is that comes out on Tuesday at 11 a.m., because that's going to give us a little bit of an insight, right? Now, this is great because at least for the remainder of Tuesday, we'll kind of have one of the insights from one of the Fed speakers. But then finally, on Wednesday at 2 p.m., we get the FOMC meetings, as I mentioned, the meeting minutes, as I mentioned, and that gives us a deeper look at what everyone's pretty much saying. Now, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, I often say Jerome Powell as if I know him without giving him the proper title. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has signaled that there's some dissent within the FOMC, right? That some individuals are more hawkish than dovish. Usually it's a very strong unanimous vote. However, the last meeting, he said, hey, there was some dissent and you're going to see some people disagreeing. And that's scary, right? I often refer to the Feds, especially to the Push and Profit private group, as the three blind mice, right? That they don't know what they're doing. When inflation was high and they were hiking rates, yeah, it's very easy. You know what you have to do. But now we come to the hard part, right? Because rates are now at around that 3%, still not that 2% level, but it gets difficult, right? Because one of the things that's holding up basically inflation is the shelter portion. But one of the things you have to understand with shelter is that shelter is a lagging indicator, especially because people don't move on a daily basis or a weekly basis, right? People pretty much move, it takes months. It could take a year for a lease to end, typically, right? Now, no, there's some leases that are 6 months, but people that may be renting, right? It's typically a year, maybe 15 months on their lease, and people don't tend to sell their house and move that often either. And so, this lagging indicator provides a very difficult portion for the Feds, because now I've been saying that they may continue hiking, or they may be too slow at cutting, right? More likely cutting, because I don't think they're going to hike anymore. I want to clarify that. But they may be too slow when it comes to cutting down these rates. And right now we have a very high level of the real rate, which is basically the delta from where inflation is, headline inflation, and where the federal fund rate is. And so we have a high real rate currently. And so that's not good, because it takes a while for the economy to feel these rate hikes. And we're starting to feel them now, right? And so that's why the markets are seeing some pain. And that's why I often say you want to pay attention to everything going on. So we have a huge week going forward. And this week is going to shape what we're going to be seeing for the overall markets and what we're going to be seeing for Tesla. So if you guys want to have access to my daily perspective on the overall markets, that's going to be the first link in the description below, where you join the Push and Profit program. You have access to the private group, where every single day I give you guys my updates on the market, and I also provide trade ideas as well. So definitely check that out. But this is a huge week, and I know I say that often, but of course you have to be agile, right? You just, like I said, can't have one view. You have to see what's going on, because in the beginning of the year, yeah, I was very bullish. We had this AI buzzword going on. We were coming off a lot of lows, and so we had a lot to really rally off of when it comes to Tesla and a lot of the tech stocks. But the thing is, now we're in earnings, and you have to live up to those expectations. I've been saying that. And it's getting more difficult. And the next earnings quarter, the next earnings seasons is going to be a little bit more difficult. I believe we're going to see more misses than hits. And so, we definitely want to stay data dependent and or continue to evaluate what's going on. But that's just my perspective on Tesla. I shared with you guys my long-term view, and then also, what I see in the short term. You guys let me know, what are your thoughts in the comment section below. Maybe you disagree with my long-term view on Tesla and the humanoid robots, right? Maybe you disagree with my view on autonomous vehicles, or maybe you agree or disagree with my short-term view. Let me know in the comment section below. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts, because you guys definitely point out things that is good to look at, right? I always think that you can't just surround yourself with people who agree with you. I think it's always best to surround yourself with people who actually disagree with you, which is something that Ray Dalio, one of the most successful fund managers, has said, because you have to understand the opposing view, to really solidify what your idea is. And so, I know I'm kind of going off tangent. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. And with that being said, guys, I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.